You're listening to Kindful the Podcast. I'm Hannah. I'm a certified meditation and mindfulness teacher, as well as a creative and a lifelong seeker. This podcast is designed to inspire a new way of being, living in the moment with more ease and alignment with our true selves. I'm on a wild journey of self-discovery and love, and I'm here to share that journey with you, with all of the tools, tips, and lessons I learn along the way. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to get into today's episode, and I really hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. I am so thrilled to have you here with me today. And before we get into this conversation, let's pause and take a nice deep breath. And exhale. Let it all go. I'm laughing because I really tried to let that all go. Let's do it again. Inhaling and exhaling. And one more time, why not? I just love taking these deep breaths at the start of the podcast episodes because it helps me to get grounded. And it helps me to kind of gather myself and gather my thoughts. And it's just really nice. It's really good for the soul, good for the nervous system, and very soothing as well. So I hope you enjoy those big deep breaths, I should say. So today I want to talk about forgiveness. And this is quite a big topic. I don't even honestly know exactly how I want to tackle it, but I just know that it's something that I want to talk about because I'm actually running a meditation tomorrow at the time of recording this on this topic, and I know I have a lot of thoughts and insights that I could share about this, but at this moment in time, nothing is really coming to me clearly. So I thought maybe if I get on the podcast and kind of speak this out, it might help me to kind of just gather my thoughts on it and kind of consolidate how I even want to talk about this and why this is important and why it relates to living mindfully, living intentionally, living compassionately and kindly, which is really what this podcast is all about. I mean, this brand Kindful is based on kindness and mindfulness, as you can probably tell from the name, but it is so much more than that. It's really about taking ourselves on a journey of learning to love ourselves, learning to get to know ourselves, learning to get to understand who we are, making sense of life and the world around us, this human experience that we're in. It's also about self-compassion, having compassion and kindness for ourselves. It's about personal growth, becoming a more whole, a more integrated, a more authentic version of ourselves, becoming our higher self, really reconnecting to who we are. This is really what I want this podcast and everything really that I'm creating to be all about. And where forgiveness comes into this is forgiveness is about letting go. That is my belief anyway. I feel like forgiveness is about letting go. And letting go allows us to shed things that no longer serve us. It allows us to move on from things that were perhaps painful or difficult or challenging from our past. It allows us to release. I'm just gesturing like myself, kind of releasing things, letting things go, and maybe take a moment to think about what this even means to you, because letting go and forgiveness to you won't look the same as it looks like to me. But forgiveness, when we talk about forgiveness, we often think about forgiving other people. We think about people doing something wrong or doing something hurtful or harmful towards us, and then we get to choose whether or not we forgive them. But I also want to bring in this idea of forgiving ourselves, because we too ourselves are human. We make mistakes. We may get lost along the way. We may find ourselves doing things towards ourselves or others that are hurtful or harmful or are not really aligned with who we are, with our true essence. And so I think it's really important to talk about both when we're talking about this big loaded topic of forgiveness, and I'm going to do my best to kind of do it justice, but when we're talking about this really heavy topic of forgiveness, it really, I think, is important to bring in both sides. It's not just forgiving other people, but it's also forgiving ourselves. And when we forgive other people, it's also often not even for the other person, it's for ourselves. It kind of sets us free. So yeah, going back to forgiveness being letting go, that really is something that can open us up to more freedom in our lives, more spaciousness, when we're not holding on to things from our past and we're not holding on to things so tightly and grasping on. We can release resentment, we can release shame, we can release guilt, we can release blame, we can release all of these things that really do cause us suffering. And suffering, I think, is often when we are resisting what is, when we are holding on to things and we're not allowing things to be as they are. And this is where I think this topic relates so much to mindfulness and the practice of mindfulness, because mindfulness is all about being here now. And it's not saying that we absolutely love what this present moment holds, but it is accepting this present moment and allowing ourselves to be with the present moment and to observe it as it is without wanting to change it or expecting it to be any different than the way it is. That can allow us to not suffer. When we are wanting things to be different than they are, we suffer. This is, I think, a Byron Katie quote, but it really does. It feels so true to me because I notice it in my own life. Anytime that I'm wanting someone else to behave in a way that they're not, I suffer. And this could be in an extreme way, or it could be just even the slightest way, an annoyance. I feel frustrated, I feel angry, I feel disappointed, I feel sad, whatever I feel. When someone is doing or saying something that I don't like, or my ego doesn't like, that I think should be different, I'm first of all projecting judgment onto them, and I'm also creating some form of suffering within myself because I'm not able to be free and loving and accepting of things as they are. So I resist it. I create that kind of barrier for myself. So I wanted to keep talking about mindfulness and forgiveness. And so forgiveness is all about, I think, releasing things that have happened in our past, things that perhaps other people have done to us, traumas they may have inflicted on us, or any kind of experience that we may have had in the past that caused us to feel any kind of emotions or any kind of feeling that really does hurt us and harms us. Forgiveness is about letting go of that in order to be free in this moment. And so if we're talking about ourselves now, if we're talking about ourselves forgiving ourselves, this is also about creating freedom in our lives, because when we are holding on to resentment towards ourselves and we are really criticizing and being hard on ourselves from something that happened in the past, when we're not able to forgive ourselves, we then create and we perpetuate that suffering that we experience in our current reality. And let's use an example of, say, I think about the things that I've found hard to forgive myself for, and often it does relate to how I treated myself and my body in the past. I've had a history of really not treating myself very well, and I'm not going to perpetuate that by continuing to judge myself for things that have happened or things that I've done in the past towards myself, but by holding on to that resentment or that negativity towards my older self, previous versions of myself, I'm actually doing my current self and my future self a disservice. Because if I'm not able to forgive myself for treating myself poorly in the past, then that influences the way that I actually show up in the present right now, because it will impact my level of deservingness, my level of self-worth. If I think that I'm a shitty person because I did some shitty things in the past, and like we all did, we all have, we are all imperfect human beings. As much as we may try and be our best and do our best, we all have done things, I'm sure, that we're not proud of in the past. And so by holding on to that and not forgiving ourselves in the present, then that actually the only thing it does is create more suffering in this moment, and also hold us back from being able to be more free in this moment and in the future, and to really be the kind of person that we want to be, and to actually grow and learn from those experiences. And this is where I've always had the belief that I don't believe in regrets, because I think that, sure, maybe to some degree, if I could go back and do things differently, I absolutely would, because I have a new perspective now on how I would do things. But the reality is we cannot go back to the past. We cannot go back and change the past. We can't change our actions, our behaviours, the things that we said or did to ourselves or to others. And the same goes for other people. They can't go back and change what has happened and the way that they perhaps, and in fact, surely did hurt you. There are people in your life that have hurt you. That is a reality. That is a fact. And that is just a part of being human. But everybody has an opportunity to learn and grow, I think, from our past, from the things that have happened. And so let me take a step back one more time. I was talking about regrets. I don't believe in regrets, because our level of consciousness now is not the same as our level of consciousness was in the past. We are constantly growing. We are constantly evolving. We are constantly changing. And with that, our consciousness is expanding and our level of consciousness is growing. And so to expect ourselves to have done what we know now in the past is ridiculous, because we didn't know better then. It's like that, I think it's a Maya Angelou saying that goes, when you know better, you do better. Our level of consciousness back then, when we made these quote unquote mistakes, or we did these quote unquote shitty things that we wouldn't do today, our level of consciousness was different. So I think this is where forgiveness, it is just almost an essential part of growth, of allowing ourselves to grow, is by allowing ourselves to forgive those previous versions of ourselves who didn't know better, who were at the time just doing the best that they could with the information that they had at the time, and the consciousness, the level of consciousness that they had at the time. And I'm talking to myself as well when I say this. I'm thinking back to younger versions of myself who was just so self-critical, so judgmental of myself, of my body, so, oh my gosh, like I wish I could go back and just give her a hug and also remind myself that those behaviors weren't actually me. They're not really who I truly am. And I feel like I talked about this recently somewhere, but to treat ourselves poorly or to treat another human being poorly is a learned behavior. No baby is born coming into this world hating themselves or hating another. These are learned behaviors. And I don't say this to place blame on our parents or our caregivers or anyone really, or it really is just a part of life that we will encounter conditioning, we will encounter programming that takes us away from our true nature. And this, I think, is where we take action or have behaviors or habits that are out of alignment with who we really are. And this, I think, is what we need to forgive. We need to forgive anything and anyone that may have let me start that over. Didn't come out the way I was expecting it to. We, I think, need to forgive ourselves and those behaviors from our past because they weren't even really who we truly are. And I think as we are growing and expanding and learning more about ourselves, we can see more clearly who we truly are. And that's where I think we can come in with this really compassionate, kind, and loving voice and say, I forgive that. I forgive you. I forgive myself for these things. Now, when I talk about forgiveness, I also really like to talk about and acceptance, because I think a big part of forgiveness is acceptance, is accepting things that happened and accepting also the present moment as it is. Being a big part of mindfulness is acceptance. But I just really want to state here that there are certain things in life that are completely unforgivable and unacceptable. And I think we all know what some of these things are. There are some things that are absolutely, completely and utterly unacceptable and unforgivable. So when we talk about forgiveness, I want to be really clear that we are not condoning those unforgivable behaviors, because we have all experienced in some way or another some sort of traumatic experience that has really shaped us and shaped our lives and caused us a lot of pain, shame, hurt, fear, all of these things. So I just want to be really clear when we're talking about this, that there can be things that are completely unforgivable, and we can still find it within ourselves to forgive others and to forgive ourselves. But it doesn't mean that in forgiving them and forgiving whatever happened, that we are condoning that. I just want to make that really clear. Forgiveness is not about saying that is okay and yep, I'm happy with what you did, I'm happy with what happened. That is not at all what forgiveness is all about, in my belief. I think forgiveness is really about setting ourselves free. It's about letting go of whatever happened and saying to ourselves, who I am right now in this moment deserves to be free of that having a hold over me and that controlling me and controlling my life. Let's say you experience some sort of I'll talk about a really personal example. I had a friend who really hurt me growing up. I had a friend who really hurt me growing up, and she basically out of nowhere ended our friendship, and it really hurt me, and it really actually traumatized me and impacted me for a long time. Friendship breakups can be so incredibly painful, and So I came to this place years and years later where I was like, I just need to forgive her and let it go. And I wasn't forgiving her for her necessarily. It was for myself, because I wanted to set myself free from that grasp, that the pain that experience caused me. I wanted to release myself from the grasp that it had over my life, because what it meant was that I wasn't able to trust other people. I wasn't able to trust friendships fully because I was still caught up in that pain from that past experience. I wasn't able to really show up and be myself because a part of me was still wounded from that experience. And so I mean, there's a number of different things that I could use as examples, and I'm sure that you, whoever you are listening to this, can call to mind some of your own personal examples of things that have happened in your life that perhaps don't make sense, that are incredibly or work incredibly painful, that seem incredibly unjust. Is it unjust or unjust? I can't remember what is the right word for that, but you know what I mean. There are things in our lives that are completely unfair, and so the forgiveness is not about trying to argue with whether or not it's just and whether or not it's fair. It's really about freeing ourselves from the hold that thing or that person or that experience holds over us, and that includes ourselves. It's freeing ourselves from the resentment that we have towards ourselves or previous versions of ourselves. So I'm just going to pause now and readjust my position because my leg is getting numb. Again, I'm recording this from bed. I often record my podcasts from bed these days because that's just what feels natural to me. But oh gosh, like I feel like I got really passionate there, and I'm really glad that I decided to come on here and record this conversation because I think it's so important, and I'm sure this is something that I'll talk about more and more as we go on this journey together, because forgiveness, I do believe, like I said earlier, really is about letting go. And it's letting go in order to experience a greater sense of peace for ourselves and to experience a greater sense of freedom. And you deserve that. You deserve to feel free. You deserve to feel at peace and at ease. You deserve to not have your past constantly haunting and tormenting you. You deserve to be free of that. And I hope that by talking about some of these things, it can help to create a space in which you can reflect on how this applies to you, and if there are things in your life that you feel like you want to, or you're ready to let go of, and you're ready to forgive others or forgive yourself for. This is something that I often like to incorporate into my meditations, is asking ourselves, what is it that I'm ready to let go of? And what is it that I'm ready to forgive myself for? I kind of use these interchangeably because I think they're often related. So something that you're ready to forgive yourself for is such a powerful question to ask yourself, and I often journal about it as well. So you might like to, if you have some kind of a journaling practice, you might like to incorporate this into your journaling. But what do I forgive myself for, or what am I ready to forgive myself for, or even what am I willing to forgive myself for? I think often when I know, especially myself, initially looking at this idea of forgiveness and kind of trying to think about how we could possibly forgive these things from our past, it can be really hard. It can feel really overwhelming. We often might feel like we're not deserving of forgiveness. When I'm here especially talking about when it comes to forgiving ourselves, we often might not feel like we're ready to forgive ourselves for whatever it may be, or feel like we're deserving of forgiveness, especially if we've hurt someone else or harmed someone else. This is something that I really struggled with in my divorce, was admitting to myself how much I had hurt someone else, and coming to a place of forgiveness for myself for doing that, because I am someone who cares deeply about other people, and my intentions are always, I like to think my intentions are pure and good. And so realizing that I hurt someone so much was really hard to come to terms with. So forgiving myself took a long time. It has taken me a long time to forgive myself. And I think sometimes still I maybe I haven't fully forgiven myself. And, you know, it was complicated when I'm talking about the divorce. It was so complicated because it wasn't just forgiving myself for hurting him in deciding to leave the relationship and deciding to end things. And I mean, like, there's so much more. And I am going to talk about my divorce at some point. But I mean, there's things that I needed to forgive him for, words that were said that can't be taken back, ways in which I was treated, ways in which he treated me, ways in which I treated him. Like, it's so complicated. There's so much more to it than just that. But it really took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I had really hurt someone, even though, and this is where it's not black and white, even though I knew that leaving that relationship was the most loving and kind thing I could actually do for him or to him, because I was setting him free. I realized that I could not love him in the way that he deserved to be loved, and he could not love me in the way that I deserved to be loved. So leaving that relationship was the most loving thing I could do. Even though that was the case, I still had to come to terms with the fact that I really hurt him. And so I had to forgive myself for that, or I've had to learn to forgive myself for that. Because if I'm still holding on to that shame and that guilt from the pain that I inflicted on him, even though my actions, like I've said, were justified and I knew that it was the right thing that needed to happen, I still have had to do that because I'm not able to show up as loving and as fully as I want to in my current relationship if I'm still holding on to that from the past, if I'm still feeling shameful and guilty from that past relationship and what happened. I'm not then actually doing my current husband, who is my whole world, I'm not doing him any service by still holding on to that from the past. And I'm also not doing myself any service. So this is, again, kind of going full circle, saying that it really is about letting go, because it's letting go so that we can serve our current version of ourselves and our future selves, so that we can serve our highest good and the highest good of others as well. And so I think I really went off on a tangent there with that example. But what I wanted to say before was, even if you don't feel completely ready to forgive yourself or to forgive someone else, even just having the willingness and recognizing that it will be something that will actually serve you and serve your future self, by letting this go, by forgiving whatever it is that happened or whoever it is that hurt you, and forgiving yourself, even just the willingness to forgive ourselves or to forgive another is such a powerful and important start. So this is something that I do also encourage in my meditations, is to, if you don't feel like you're ready to let go of something or to forgive something, just having the willingness to let it go. And this is where we can kind of call on a greater power, whether you believe in God or the universe or source, whatever you believe in. It's kind of calling, it's in a way surrendering. It's saying, look, I know that I need to forgive this, and I know that I want to forgive this in order to move forward, in order to let go of the past, but I don't know how to do it, so please help me. Please guide me and support me. And I think in time we will find that we are able to find that place within us to forgive things and let them go. So wow, this has felt like a really powerful conversation, and I'm really glad that I came on here and recorded it, because I think it is so, it really is about letting ourselves be free and allowing others to be free too. And I just once again want to say that there are, of course, going to be things in our lives that don't seem fair, that we can't make sense of, that that are not acceptable and that are unforgivable. There are, but I think that two things can exist at once, and there can be these things that are completely unacceptable, but we can find it within ourselves to learn to accept it, to of course process and feel whatever we need to feel, to work through it with the support of a therapist or any kind of mentor or person that you trust that can help you to move through and process that experience, and really do seek out support if you need it, if you feel like you need it. But in processing it, in accepting it, in then letting it go and forgiving whatever it may be, we can create a greater sense of freedom and peace in our lives. And I think that then spreads out towards others, and this is what can create a greater world for us to live in. This is what can really expand our consciousness as a collective, is if we are able to release whatever it is that we're holding on to that no longer serves us. So I hope this conversation has served you today, and I'm just so grateful to have you here. And I know it is a heavy topic, so please go gently. Please be kind to yourself. Please be loving, and just remind yourself that you are human, that no one is perfect. None of us are perfect. So I see you and I honor you wherever you're at, and I'm just sending you all my love. All right, I look forward to talking to you in my next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it and got some value from it. If you did, please feel free to share this with your friends and your loved ones and anyone who may need to hear it. I hope this episode brought you some calm amongst the chaos of life and reminded you just how worthy, important, and loved you are, exactly as you are in this moment. Thank you so much for being here and for being you. There is no one else just like you. So I am so grateful to have you here, and I look forward to speaking with you in my next episode. Bye for now.